Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is Dr. James Lyons-Weiler coming to you live from the WWDNYK studios in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. This is the show Unbreaking Science, and we're going to talk science, we're going to talk law, we're going to talk civil rights, we're going to talk about coronavirus, we're going to talk about vaccines. Today, I have a really special guest, a good friend of mine, somebody I've worked with for I think about a year and a half now, helping her execute and secure your civil rights on vaccine choice. Welcome, Patty Finn. How are you, my dear?
Oh, hi. How are you? Thank
I'm
you
doing
for
well.
having me.
Yeah, thanks for being on here. I've got a slew of questions here for you, but first I wanted to let people know if you don't know who Patricia Finn is, she is the good health lawyer. She has um, been defending vaccine rights for a good number of years, and she's probably best known for kicking Ed Day's butt in Rockland County with respect to trying to make it illegal for people who are not vaccinated against measles to go out into public. And, at least today, when we're talking about coronavirus, people are understanding things like essential things like you have to go and get food. So this guy at Day was really trying to hammer down on people's rights, their ability to congregate, their ability to go get food, their ability to freedom to worship, and of course go to school, unless they're vaccinated against measles. And I wanted to go back to that moment in time because there was a divergence that happened after that in New York State, and then we kind of won it back, but in terms of our rights. But for people who are not familiar with your role back then in Rockland County, what had happened? How did that all get started, Betty?
Jack, it was a year ago this week that case went down. On April 1st, our Rockland County Executive, Ed Day, issued an emergency regulation, and it's kind of unheard of. No one had ever done it ever before in the history of at least American jurisprudence. Maybe there was a small there's been a quarantine before in Pennsylvania about 50 years ago, but this was like a really sweeping regulation, and he banned all non-vaccinated children under the age of 18 from public spaces. So, as you'll recall, I represented Jane Doe. She was a parent here in New York State that has religious beliefs contrary to vaccinating, and that was when the religious exemption still existed. Little did we know, 2 months later, the legislature would ultimately axe the religious exemption in New York State. And I never dreamed that it would happen. I thought we had it nailed, and it was a super close call, and I'll get to that in a little bit in the chronology of things. But, back to the first week of April, Ed Day passes this kooky emergency regulation. And over the years, I've developed some wisdom, I guess, when it comes to fighting these things. And
Mm-hmm.
it's always better to take little bites at the law, the easy laws, the easy regulations. Those are the ones you want to attack. I mean, I do have, massive cases going that, could change the world, I guess, God willing, if we prevail. But what I do is go after the low hanging fruit, and this was like super easy. The county executive had no authority to exclude any kids from anywhere because there was no emergency. The pretext of the regulations was that there was a measles emergency in Rockland. And, Jack, you and I have looked to obtain data on the actual number of cases. What was there any
Mm-hmm.
testing done, or, we really don't know. I mean, you helped me with that, understanding the type of testing that was needed. But I can tell you, living here in New York, I didn't see anybody. And with all due respect to the people that are afraid and corona and all that, I haven't seen anybody with corona either. I mean, I
Yeah.
suppose it's happening, but my friends are sending me videos from Bellevue and hospitals in Brooklyn and Manhattan, and the one in Queens that made mainstream media. The ER doctor was running around like a chicken with their head off, crying she didn't have enough ventilators and saying everybody had COVID, when in fact she didn't know if a single person had COVID. And then out in the hallway, there were 5 unused ventilators lined up against the wall. So, there's a lot of hysteria going on, and I know people are afraid, and I know people are sick, and
Yeah.
I'm sorry about that, but I haven't seen that, nor did I see any measles cases. So anyway, the short of it was we went in and we argued in front of a really great judge, Judge Rolf Thorson. He's Rockland County Supreme Court, and I argued there is no epidemic, and there isn't even an emergency. And in the government's papers, in the county's papers, they used the word epidemic like at least 10 times.
Yeah.
And so the judge came back and he revoked the emergency regulation, he restrained it, and that meant kids could go back to school. And then the county took that to the appellate division in Brooklyn, and they did not disturb Judge Thorison's decision. They left it alone. So we won there. But the significant thing about that was the judge ruled. He defined what the law. He defined how the law defines epidemic.
Hmm.
And according to Judge Thorson, there had never been any definition in the law as to what an epidemic is. And so he went to Webster's, or maybe, yeah, Webster's, and adopted the colloquial definition, which is what you do in circumstances like that. And he determined there was no emergency. And in the end, that ruling was remarkable, to say
Yeah,
the
that was a
least.
huge win, and I wanted to bring people back to that moment in time in New York because that was a line in the sand with respect to measles, at least, that you can't just make up a story about how bad something is. I'm using layman's terms because I do that with law, but you can't just make up a story about how bad something is and then give some remedy that you think is appropriate. There's a technical level of logic and reason, and there's actual precedent in the law, right, Patty? That you have to show that the remedy that you're implementing is the. You go ahead and explain what remedy is in this situation.
Well, I'm not sure it addressed remedy so much as, although, your remedy has to meet your need, right? If you're damaged, you can't ask for a remedy that doesn't restore you. You could get punitive and other types of damages, but, there has to be a nexus between your remedy and your injury. But what was so significant about that ruling is that here we have as a New York State judge who's saying, look, less than 0.02% of Rockland County's population has been diagnosed with measles. And again, we don't even know if how they were diagnosed. Maybe they were just guessing, like they're doing with COVID in many instances. And that decision was critical. Now, just yesterday, the county executive, who seems to have an issue with public health, I don't know, maybe he's a frustrated doctor or something, but he seems to think that he knows everything about every medical and scientific issue when it comes to the transmission of disease and illness like that. And he's dangerous. I think he's a reckless guy. I mean, personally, I like him a lot. I mean, I voted for him, and I'm not sure I would again, but only because of this issue, not because I think he's a bad man or anything. I think he's a
Hmm.
good man actually, but he's highly misguided. And yesterday he passed another kooky regulation where now he's closed all the outdoor parks here because of a claim that, or I haven't seen any evidence, but some claim that people were not uh, maintaining 6 feet of distance. They were not social distancing, and he closed the parks. Now, uh, if I was a big law firm and I had millions of dollars laying around, I would attack that the way I did last year. And I would attack it on the same grounds. I would go to the judge and I would ask, is this an appropriate regulation? Is there an emergency here? And to cause the government to have to prove it. They can't prove it. I mean, I know there's a hysteria and fear going on. That they certainly have gotten, they got that part right. But as for the actual threat and what needs to be done, maybe they can prove it, but I I don't think they can.
Okay,
Now,
so
you may have
let me go
a
back to
view
that
on.
question that I was talking about. I used the word remedy, and I didn't use the right word because I'm not a legal expert. But what I meant was that if there's going to be something enacted by the government to restrict the rights of a person or people,
Oh,
that it has to be in keeping with not only something that will solve the problem.
rationally, it
I'll
has
give
to
you.
be
I'll give you. Let me.
rational.
I want them to understand the question too. So the people that are on the show, I want them to understand the question. What I'm asking is that that when the government puts a restriction on you, that restriction not only has to solve the problem, right? We can end crime just by killing all the criminals. That's a solution. But the solution has to be rational. It has to be scaled and do the least harm. What is that concept?
I'd say it's actually rational basis. It has
Rational
to
basis.
have
Okay.
a rational basis, and there's three types of basis. There's heightened scrutiny, which requires the highest level of scrutiny, as it sounds, and then you have intermediate scrutiny, where there has to be a compelling government interest, and indeed the government would argue that, and then there you have a rational basis that it's rationally related to the end it's trying to achieve. And I have argued repeatedly that these cases require heightened scrutiny. And of course, the government's coming back and saying, no, we only have to prove rationally related. And the reason that is significant legally is because anything that's rationally related usually gets upheld. The
Yeah.
court's not going to substitute its judgment, and it's going to say, well, look, uh, keeping people home during this epidemic, it appears rational, and probably would get that. But if you applied a heightened scrutiny, there would have to be more than a compelling government interest. And no court has yet to do that. I have asked several courts so far to apply heightened scrutiny to these vaccine laws. And I've cited things like Cruzon. Many people remember that case about the woman that was on a life-saving brain device, but she was dead. And the issue of who had the right to terminate her life, or could her life be terminated? And what was significant there was the court talked about the right to refuse a medical treatment as being a fundamental right, and thus heightened scrutiny applies. So, to answer your question, they would say, look, it's rationally related to keeping social distancing. And my response would be, no, you need to require heightened scrutiny because you're infringing on people's fundamental liberty interests and rights.
That's great.
And and you can't prove it because why? We have no epidemic.
Right.
If you go back to last April and you apply Judge Thorison's formula or analysis that he used, you would not have an epidemic. There's not enough people in the population being affected to qualify as an epidemic. Yet you have the World Health Organization calling it a pandemic.
You're talking about
And
coronavirus now. So, okay.
yeah, I'm talking about coronavirus.
Right, right.
Mhm.
Okay, so let's stay on rational basis for a minute because this really segues into the topic I wanted to get in with you. Right now, today, people are terrified on social media. There was a person that went swimming. I think it was in California. The lifeguard said, you're not supposed to be here," and he's all alone. He's out in the ocean. He's swimming or wherever body of water he was in, and he was physically removed. I guess I don't know what the consequences were, but he was not a threat to anyone. One would argue, I suppose, that there's a rational basis for social distancing during a pandemic. But the question is it applied? Is it given sufficient scrutiny? Is it just indiscriminately being used without a commensurate level of force or state force? I mean, Gandhi taught us that all government is violence, but um, the other concern that people are terrified, and I want you to comment on if you could, is this idea that is emerging today, that there's just today in the news, that people are starting to say, government officials are starting to say that if there's somebody in a home that has a sick person in it with coronavirus, that the government may have to go in there and get everybody else out of there. And scientifically, I've studied the virus, I've studied its transmission dynamics, I've studied all the science that I could get my hands on about it. If you're in a house with somebody for an hour in a closed circulation, you're going to have an infection. So it does no good to pull anybody from the house. They might not show symptoms for another, 4 to 5 days, but the state coming in the minute a person tests positive or has a diagnosis and pulling everybody else by force out of a home, that's absolutely ridiculous. So can you cast my sentiment and my logic, my understanding, my intuition in terms of legal terms? How would you argue if a family was torn apart on the basis of, well, the state's protecting the other people in the house because somebody has coronavirus in the house?
That's like an excellent question. And if I was presented with that scenario, and there was funding, and I mean these things cost huge amount of money,
Yeah.
and so you don't want to take a crummy case, right? You want to make sure that the case you take is a good one and it's going to set a good precedent. And I'm not suggesting that just some people have better fact patterns than others, not that their concerns are any less important. But you don't want to bring someone with a weak fact pattern that could get thrown out. So what you're saying is very interesting, and I would definitely challenge it and make them prove that this type of action, removing healthy people from the home, is furthering a government interest, whether it was rational or intermediate or heightened scrutiny. I would say an infringement like that coming into somebody's home by force, which like that is really scary, and removing anybody from their home who's done nothing wrong, that opens a huge opportunity for the rights of individuals to refuse this type of corona nonsense that's going
It's
on.
yeah, absolutely, and it's totally inhumane as well. I mean, we're looking at a situation where somebody could become deathly ill and only survive on the basis of the fact that somebody's helping to keep their fever down, keeping them nourished. I mean, Chris Cuomo's wife would be stripped from Chris Cuomo's house if this kind of rule, took place. And there's the governor, I guess, Governor Gretchen Whitmer in Michigan, that also said that if there were any doctors who used hydroxychloroquine, that she would shut them down. She'd go after their license. And, I'm like, okay, since when And another governor too. I don't want to misquote anybody, but another governor of another state made similar overtures on this kind of stupidity because the science actually shows that hydroxychloroquine is a very excellent candidate for not only treatment of this in critical cases, but potential prophylactic use, the way that it's used routinely, hundreds of millions of doses over the past 50 years or longer to prevent malaria. And this governor says, no, 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 no. If you use this, it's FDA approved for off-label use. It's FDA approved as a drug, so that means it's FDA approved for off-label use anyway, without anything further. It's FDA emergency use authorized, and this governor knows better than the FDA. Since when does the governor of a state have the police power to say that they're going to restrict the freedom of practice, a licensed profession of medicine, simply because you're practicing medicine, you're trying to save someone's life? And if you comment on that, I have some good news for some people on this. But go ahead. What's the rationale? Where are they coming from? These people seem like there's some kind of a police power grab or something.
Oh, it's totally, totally a power grab. There is no doubt. And there's a lot of drama going on. The Cuomo's in particular, with all due respect to the governor. I don't know if you've ever heard him talk. He's from Queens. It's like a power drill to the side of your head. It's like the most whiny, dragged out. And I'm telling you, and the way he talks, it's like so annoying. And he's like, I'm not kidding around. You gotta listen to me. Like, who does he think he is?
He thinks
And he
he's trying to be his dad.
well, his dad, I loved his dad when
I
I was
loved
a
his
little
dad too.
girl.
That's the strange thing. I don't
I
understand. On this vaccine
when
thing,
I
I'm sorry. I got to say, I grew up in New York State, and on this vaccine thing, especially for something like measles, Mario Cuomo would laugh at measles. Mario Cuomo that I knew would say, "There's no threat." I could see him on what was a Good Morning America or some morning show on Saturday. I could see Mario Cuomo going, "There's no threat to our people here. I grew up with measles. You grew up with measles.
yeah.
Everybody that I know had measles, and no one died." I can see Mario Cuomo making this counter argument because it's rational, but I'm not going to pick on Andrew Cuomo, and certainly we want Chris Cuomo and wish him a total and complete recovery. My point being, this governor of Michigan is saying you are not allowed to practice your profession as you see fit, even though the FDA rubber stamped this thing and said, go for it, use it if you can get it. Where do they get this idea? I mean, what's the rational base? What's their legal foundation for that?
Oh, the reason it is relevant in New York is you might know that I do have a very important case pending right now. It's a little boy named Thorne Schwartz. He's autistic, allegedly vaccine injured, and his doctor had given him a medical exemption for 9 doses of vaccines. And in August, okay, last year in New York, first we had the Ed Day executive order that got thrown out. And then 2 months later, the state repealed the religious exemption. And then in August, the Department of Health issued a bunch of regulations. And those regulations uh, basically took the power away from the doctor, and the state claims that it's up to the school principal to grant or deny a medical exemption, and then the state can fine the school if they keep anybody in school with a medical exemption that is not compliant with the regulations. And those regulations require ACIP, CDC compliance, or compliance with nationally evidence-based, nationally recognized evidence-based standards of care. Well, anyway, the long and short of it is that um, the long and short of that is that I went in and I challenged that because this little guy got kicked out of school, and I went in and I challenged it, and I argued that in New York State, the statute says it is up to the doctor. Every state but California says it's up to the doctor as to how to treat their patient, how to diagnose their patient. This law is based on two important legal propositions or standards or doctrines, two important legal doctrines. One is the learned intermediary doctrine, and the other is informed consent. And the learned intermediate doctrine is a tort doctrine, and it's never been applied in this situation. But what it says is that the doctor comes in between the patient and the drug. In this case, it would be the vaccine and the student. And it's the doctor's role as the learned intermediary to make the decision. And you can't put a school principal over a doctor's opinion on whether or not the child should be vaccinated. And more important, it violates the statute. So this was again another easy case. It was a lot like what Ed Day did. Ed Day's emergency regulations are easier than statutes.
Hmm.
It's easier to knock out a rule than it is to invalidate a statute. So I mean, it can be done, and it should be done with a lot of the laws that are out there. But in any event, so I argued, and in this case, I've had some success. I did get the kid back into school. Little Thorn was back to school. Now all schools are closed, but I did get him back into school, and he's not vaccinated. So that was a good sign. And then we had oral argument on February 13th, and then the next day on February 14th, Corona really blew up in New York, and all of a sudden, we were all restrained. The other doctrine that is important here and applies to your example, and it's certainly a matter before this judge in New York State. He's in Yates County. He's a great judge. And I think he is anyway. He seemed eager to listen and clearly understood what I was saying. That's always a good thing. So the informed consent is based on a case called Schlondorf versus I think it was some hospital in New York, and Justice Cardoza issued an opinion, and he said that, and this is New York law, any person subjected to a medical treatment without consent is uh, subject to a battery. You could bring a charge a claim for a
Hmm.
battery, and so or charge a battery. So the point is that it's up to the doctor. That's it. It's up to the doctor,
So
and it's up to the patient.
okay. So that's reassuring because what I want to do now is I want to bring up and share with everyone this fantastic news story that's coming from Detroit Free Press. That, if you don't mind, Patty, Detroit representative, this is State Representative Kate Whitsett, says hydroxychloroquine and President Donald Trump helped save her life amid COVID-19 fight. This is in Lansing. A Democratic state representative from Detroit is crediting hydroxychloroquine and Republican President Donald Trump, who touted the drug for saving her in her battle with coronavirus. State Representative Karen Whitsett, um, that says Kate, I should say Karen, sorry, who learned Monday that she had tested positive for COVID-19, said that she started taking hydroxychloroquine on March 31st, prescribed by her doctor, after both she and her husband sought treatment for a range of symptoms um, on March 18th. Quote, it was less than 2 hours, unquote, before she started to feel relief, said Whitsett, who had experienced shortness of breath, swollen lymph nodes, and what she felt like a sinus infection. She is still experiencing headaches, she said. Now, Whitsett said she was familiar with the wonders of hydroxychloroquine from an earlier bout with Lyme disease, but does not believe that she would have thought to ask for it or her doctor would have prescribed it had Trump not touted it as a possible treatment for COVID-19. President Trump is being castigated, as you well know, Patty, for making what people are saying are false claims. The people that are saying that are false claims are the people that are pushing us to wait 18 months for a vaccine, which may not be
That's right.
safe, which may not be effective, which may actually induce pathogenic priming or disease enhancement in people who get the vaccine, who are then followed up with a an infection later on. And so, I think it's really important and fantastic that she stepped forward and she said, "My doctor gave me this. This is in Michigan, where the governor has threatened to pull the license." So it'll be really interesting to see if that doctor is now going to actually be under the threat of the governor. This is a states' right issue. The power of the state versus the power of the FDA regulation. And I'm telling you right now, I've never seen anything like it. I know with respect to vaccinations, people are used to thinking in terms of the rights of the state to determine with vaccinations. But when it comes to medical licenses and the boards, those are interstate. The boards are state boards, but the regulations, the federal regulations are interstate. So Patty, what do you think is going to happen up in Michigan? Are they going to let this one slide, and now that it's being shown to be effective, or what?
I don't know. I read though that the state of Michigan then ordered the drug after blasting Trump, and then went ahead and ordered it. It's very similar to what's going on in Thorne's case. They're in New York State because of these regulations. No doctor wants to give a medical exemption because they don't want to get their license impugned. Our friend Dr. Sears in California, he was terrorized by the licensing board, and I think it's because his brother appeared in the movie Vaxxed. I mean, this stuff is all connected. I think last year they targeted Rockland. I'm here. The Jewish community is here. It was like perfect. Knock
Yeah.
them out, and it did hurt me. And people think, oh well, they are targeting places. They targeted California. They targeted New York. Now, I don't know. Is there a giant conspiracy with Bill Gates at the helm and all these government agencies conspiring? No. But it is easy to predict these types of actions and then plan to take advantage of them. And that's what I see is going on. So now, say you're a doctor in Michigan, you prescribe the drug, and then the governor tries to yank your license. She does not have the authority to do that, and it would have to go through the licensing board, and then it would be challenged.
Yeah.
It would be challenged by the doctor, and probably would prevail.
That's okay. So look how
Yeah.
insane this is. If we have a doctor who's currently treating coronavirus patients, currently putting herself in harm's way of potentially being infected with SARS-CoV-2 virus, she's actively practicing medicine as allowed by her license, and the governor threatens to take her license away, prevent her from treating patients with coronavirus. That governor needs her head checked. I mean, there are places where that the medical community had to go on strike to tell the government, we're not dealing with this unless you give us adequate protection. We need more personal protective equipment. I remember in Hong Kong, there was a threat to go on strike. And Hong Kong did the right thing. They ended up testing everybody. I bet you these medical professionals are going to, they're going to be popping these hydroxychloroquine pills like candy to make sure, like once a week for 3 or 5 days, they're going to want to make sure that they are protected against this virus, given that it does have this very strange multi-systemic autoimmune thing. Which brings me to something I wanted to share with people that IPAC has successfully written, studied, and written up a study of the similarities between the proteins of the coronavirus that's circulating in the world right now and human proteins. And this paper, I'm going to get the galley proofs on Thursday for this paper. And the title is Pathogenic Priming Likely Induces Serious and Critical Illness in COVID-19 via Autoimmunity. And I determined that because the types of proteins that are similar between the parts of the proteins that are similar between the viral protein and the human body proteins are lighting up in the areas of the body where we see the systemic effects, the liver, the kidney, the heart, and of course the lungs. And so, the fact that the alveolar sac in the lungs just appears to be deteriorate all the way down to the basal membrane. That's not just an inflammation caused by the virus. That is absolutely an autophagic condition in which the immune system believes that it has to destroy all the tissue. And so what I want to do, and we're going to talk about Patty's initiatives too, but what I want to do is I want to say that to make this publication open access so that we can all take the concerns of pathogenic priming, aka disease enhancement, aka immune enhancement, to your state representatives and to your federal legislators as well, and say, listen, we need to have this animal testing. It is not rational to proceed to human trials. So they started as small phase 1 human trials, their dose variation trials, and then they're going to go to phase 2. We need to argue every day up until they start a phase 2 trial that phase 2 trial doesn't start without knowing that if they unleash a vaccine on the public, that we're all going to be more sensitive through pathogenic priming to autoimmune conditions against so many important parts of our body. And it turns out that 7 out of the 21 proteins that may be targeted by autoimmunity induced by a vaccine or by an infection from this virus are very critical and very important immune system proteins. And so we don't want autoimmunity against our own immune system. That may be part of the problem here for some people. There may be a genetic basis. I'm speculating that a person might have a protein that's more similar to the viral protein so that their immune system gets shut down through autoimmunity. I don't know. It's a hypothesis. It's stated through peer review. The evidence behind it is the homology. Now we have to look for cross-reactive antibodies in survivors. But I'm fighting the science. Patty's fighting through objectivity and law, and I just love looking at how many cases do you have going on right now with vaccine rights?
I have right now. I have 2 civil rights. I have 3 civil rights cases pending. I have a very big oral argument in April, at the end of April, in a case called Doe v. Merck. And that is alleging violations of the Vaccine Act against the Secretary of Health and Human Services and Merck in the alleged destruction of evidence linking MMR to autism.
Yeah.
And so that's a very big case that I'm excited about. And it's hard getting a reversal at this level, and of course with the current situation, I don't know, maybe the judges might be, whatever, police power, and the government can do whatever they want.
You had
But I don't
you
think
had a
so.
recent win, Patty, in February, didn't you?
Yes. Yeah. Well, I was going to get to that, but that case is very, very big, and it's very important to me. And I've worked on it for many years. We've raised, quite a bit of money towards that case. So that's huge. Yes. In February, I did get a temporary restraining order in the case of Thorne Schwartz versus New York State Department of Health, and that's the case I mentioned earlier.
Mm-hmm.
He's the little guy with the autism, and his doctor gave him a medical exemption, and the school principal overruled it and denied it and put the little guy out of school. So when we went to court, you had the principal pointing at the state, saying that he did it because the state made him do it, and the state pointing at him and saying, we didn't do it, it's up to the principal. And I said to the judge, it's not up to either one of them, it's up to the doctor. So we're waiting on a ruling there. And the fact that I got a temporary restraining order is pretty big. I brought probably 100 cases like this, and I've only gotten maybe 3 or 4
Yeah.
temporary restraining orders. I'm getting better.
Well, it's
At
not you.
first,
Yeah, no, it's not you.
no,
The deck is totally stacked against us. So
but
go ahead.
that's what's exciting about these wins is that I'm smarter now about it. Like I said, I'm taking smaller bites.
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah.
I haven't gone after this statute, but let me go after this regulation.
Right.
You know,
No, that makes sense.
right? Because with each one of those, you get a ruling that takes you closer. Last year, we got a judge to declare there was no measles epidemic in at least in Rockland, and Rockland was the alleged epicenter. That was huge,
Yeah.
huge. And so I have right now 3 civil rights cases. I also represent a Hasidic family here that has also been denied a medical exemption. And right now, Ed Day is looking to quarantine the Jewish community. And it seems like here in New York, they're always targeting that population. I don't mean it even racist. Maybe it is. I don't know, but God knows. Every time there's a problem, it seems to involve that community, and it's not fair. It's in my opinion, it's totally not fair,
Yeah,
and
so
there's no.
there's a lot of variation in practices that vary culturally, and people handle things differently. The they educate their children differently. They
That's right,
and I don't mean
like
they. I'm not
Amish.
talking about they as in a particular group of people. Various people around the world with different cultures solve problems that society face differently. I mean, there are thousands of years of cultural development. I heard that or I read, I should say, that in Brazil there's concern that coronavirus could wipe out the Amazonian indigenous peoples, and that the same concern is there out in New Mexico for the Navajos and indigenous Native Americans. And so how do we how there's a balance. We have to find a happy balance here between protecting you know the public, which are individuals, and allowing the rights of individuals and the rights of community groups.
Right.
And there,
Well,
this is what.
that's why you need the science. Like that's why someone like you providing someone like me the science. I mean, you and I both know. I wanted to be a doctor, but the science was too hard. I'm
Yeah.
just kidding.
Yeah, so
There's
thank you,
nothing
Patty.
to
So
really follow
I
it.
want to do the following. I want to bring up the Vaccine Rights Legal Defense Fund here for people. It's at Go Get Funding, and the link I'll put in the comments on Facebook and on YouTube. This this is Patty's page here, and believe me, for all of what she's done, you started this fund a year ago or so. For all the
Actually, that's the second one.
yeah, the
We were
second one.
deactivated, and that is what we've collected through there. But last year, in total, we collected 250,000 in fees and donations. I
Right on.
applied fees. If I did a consultation, I applied it to the pro bono work. The
Right
pro
on.
bono work takes everybody further, and so and we report it all, so it's not they're going to try to bust me there. It's like
Yeah.
ridiculous.
Yeah.
And so that's good. And then also, what I did not mention is I do have right now about 11 vaccine injury cases, and at least 2 more I'm going to file. So I won another I settled a fairly large vaccine injury case a couple of months ago,
Oh, great.
Streeter
Congratulations.
versus HHS. And this fella got Guillain-Barré from flu vaccine, and I was able to settle that, and they were very happy with that. Now the government's looking to change the law and the vaccine table, remove what's called a CERVA injury, which is a shoulder injury. And my client had Guillain-Barré, so it wasn't a shoulder injury. But anyway, not to get too technical, that was pretty big. And I have two cases right now for children that died after receiving vaccines. One is a boy in Yonkers. He received the meningococcal vaccine and he was dead the next day. And the other is a little girl named Kaylin Matten. Unfortunately, her case has been pending for over 8 years. And her little girl was 6 years old. She got a flu vaccine on December 4th, and she was deceased December 8th. And all of the evidence pointed to the flu vaccine that she received as the cause of death.
Yeah.
Now, I don't have decisions in those cases, but they're coming. And I could tell you, Jack, I mean, with your science, right, and my legal brain, uh, a brain for the law, um, I could be tearing this apart. I mean, filing cases right and left. And it's just simply a resource issue. There aren't a lot of lawyers willing to do the work I do because it's not profitable. The big companies can't figure out how to make money. I've been sabotaged a lot, corporate wise, and there's been a lot of problems. But if anybody out there is watching and you want something to happen and you want to see change, I certainly have plenty of clients that would be bellwether and perfect for bringing cases. And each case that we bring is another whack at it, strengthening our rights. I don't know about restoring religious exemptions, but that's not going to happen until we get to the Supreme Court. And I'm one court away from the Supreme Court. The case next month, whether I win or I lose, it's going to go to the Supreme Court. If I lose, I'll take it to the Supreme Court. If
Hmm.
the other way around, I'll go to the Supreme Court. And until we get in front of the Supreme Court and until we get a court to reinterpret Jacobson versus Massachusetts or explain it, because the court that I'm appearing in front of in the Fourth Circuit, I'm going to be in the Second Circuit, and the Fourth Circuit have ruled, and other courts have last summer here in New York. A lot of courts ruled that there is no First Amendment protection to refuse a mandatory vaccine. Okay, a lot of people think, well, I have, you know, religious freedom and I can refuse a vaccine. Well, sorry, you can't. And that is the law. And that law in the Fourth Circuit, the Second Circuit, and what was litigated in California in the Whitlow case, and in the cases brought here in state court, all of them are interpreting the Supreme Court's decision in Jacobson versus Massachusetts as as follows. As I said previously, there is no First Amendment protection to refuse a mandatory vaccine. And I can tell you that that is not what the Supreme Court said in Jacobson. The language did say compulsory vaccines do not violate the Constitution. It did say that. But the decision went further in that the decision required the vaccines be necessary, they be harm avoidant, they be proportional, and they be non discriminatory. There had to be an epidemic of grave danger that imperils a society. That's why the case last year that Judge Thorson ruled no epidemic, right? And
Yeah.
the appellate division sustained that. So now I got a judge and an appellate court in New York that basically agreed there was no epidemic, and I have a definition of an epidemic. So I need, I would argue in all of these scenarios, everything that we discussed today, they have to prove there's an epidemic. They have to prove grave danger. And they have to prove that the vaccine, anyway, that is to follow inevitably, is safe, it's proportional, it's harm avoidant, and it's necessary.
Right, that it has a rational basis. And so, it's funny that we have
No,
we,
heightened scrutiny. I mean, you're right. That's what they would say.
with heightened scrutiny, but I want to go right to the core of the issue because if they don't do long-term randomized placebo-controlled double-blinded clinical trials for vaccines, then there is not a rational basis to claim that they're safe. There's not a rational basis to claim that they're effective in the long run. And Bill Gates has this clinical trial that he's funding on hydroxychloroquine, and he's using vitamin C as a placebo. That's not an inert placebo. And so whatever his findings are, if there's a ruling or a regulation or some judge's decision or a law that's put into place disallowing hydroxychloroquine on the basis of Bill Gates' phony study that doesn't even pass the sniff test. My Twitter blew up. Patrick Layton, I think, was the first on the Highwire team, was the first one that I saw it from. That there's an invalid placebo in the hydroxychloroquine study. They're comparing it to vitamin C, which is a health-inducing vitamin. Why not use saline or not saline? Why not use a sugar pill? The point being, our response to that will be that you don't have a rational basis for your legislation. You don't have a rational basis for your judgment as a governor to say you can't use this therapeutic. And it's ridiculous that we know
Jack,
what the Chinese did. We know what the Chinese did. The Chinese did social distancing, and they brought in therapeutics. And they did really severe social distancing, and they brought in therapeutics, and they ended it. It's over. That now people are going to say, "Oh, Jack, you're so naive. You believe the Chinese." Yeah, I believe because I saw the thousands and thousands of tourists that are going and swamping their natural areas because they can go out back into nature. How do I know that wasn't filmed 10 years ago? I don't know, but I know what they did. I know what Korea did. Korea had accurate testing from the beginning. They used a rational basis to test and do contact tracing. Our country, we created a test that was severely flawed because we wanted to be the CDC to be the center and be all of testing so that they could validate everybody else's test. They created a messed up test. It was flawed. They shipped out a flawed test, and that let thousands of cases go. And we couldn't do contact tracing. Don't let anybody kid you. There's no accurate contact tracing going on anymore with an RT-PCR test because CDC has not yet, in spite of my requests to the FDA, has never published the accuracy, sensitivity, and specificity of their RT-PCR test. And so that's why IPAC has this back to work program. It's a voluntary program that's private. You don't have to report to anyone your status. 100% private. Your body, your blood, your information. No, the government's not going to get your DNA from the test. No, you don't have to ship anything. You get a test that you order and it comes to your house. Or you go to the drugstore and you pick it up, just like a pregnancy test. You prick your finger, you put a drop of blood on the device. If you get one line, you don't have anything in your body related to coronavirus. If you get 2 lines, you have been exposed and may have an active infection. If you get 3 lines, you've been exposed, you had an active infection, and you're on your way to immunity or you are immune. So add to the end of that 5 days, 7 days, I don't know, 14 days of social isolation, everybody goes back to work. If you're asymptomatic and you have no evidence of being exposed by this antibody test, go back to work tomorrow. This is ludicrous. That's a rational basis. And the people that want a vaccine, they don't want this kind of testing. Why? Because then you can say, well, look, I'm already immune. I don't need your vaccine. So we need to
That's right.
change everything in the United States, everything about the FDA regulating. You should be able to know your antigen status, your antibody status, your own immunity status. It's your body. You should certainly be able to know whether you're immune to coronavirus or not. Over in the UK, they're saying probably half the population's already been infected, but the symptoms are mild in 80%. So why are these people still on lockdown? What's the government plan
I
to let
know.
these people go free? There's no
You
rational
know what?
basis for a universal quarantine lockdown when we know maybe 80%, 86% of the cases are unreported. And everybody that's been exposed is, according to Anthony Fauci, going to be immune. So what are they doing? Where's the rational basis? It all stems back and it all traces back to CDC insisting that they have their own test, that they be the primary agency that validates everybody else's test. They can't make a test that validates. Their test was flawed. They have no business being in this. They need to pack their bags and go home, quarantine the CDC. Hashtag quarantine the CDC. Join me in this and share this out. I had to get that rant out, Patty.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, that was a good one. I like that hashtag quarantine the CDC. You know, Jack, the truth is, like, I would love to take it on. You know, I really would, but I need more support in the community. We need funding. I'm not sure taking on CDC or the FDA is the way to go. I'm not equipped to do that. But I can bring actions against the local municipality for closing the parks. And in doing that, you know, we can get better rulings, we can get more clarification and detail about, you know, what is an epidemic, you know, prove to me that there really is this issue going on. Now, the thing about the CDC and, say, Secretary of Health and Human Services, FDA, they have immunity. So
Say
it's
that
very
again.
hard.
There was a glitch. Say that again.
They have immunity.
Okay.
It's hard to sue them. You can't sue the government. You know, you might be able to bring a certain administrative action to demand.
Okay, no, I agree. I agree. So what I want to say is, when I say we need to
But
change how it's regulated, what I mean is we need to go to your state representatives, go to your
yes,
congressional representatives, and say that you absolutely have to get them to make the FDA allow personal, in-home, private testing. We have to change it to asymptomatics. If you can afford a test, which is about $100, and if we all buy the test, and I mean all Americans buy the test, the cost will go down to about $10. If we all buy them, you have your information. And if you're worried about the people are pushing back on this in an incredible way. If you're worried about the test infecting you with something, use your own needle and prick your own finger with your own needle and drop it on there and use gloves otherwise. Just and treat it like it's toxic waste, whatever you got to do. But the point being, okay, what if it's a rigged test? What if this? What if this? What if this? Okay, this test from South Korea by Biomedomics was validated by South Korea. We know its sensitivity, 91%. We know its specificity, 88%. I can't tell you those numbers for the CDC's test because they don't have them. They never tested against the gold standard. There is no gold standard because who knows what the truth
right,
is. So the point being,
yeah,
this is not a legal fight. I'm not itching for a legal fight. What I'm itching for is your action to contact your representatives and say that you want American citizens, even if you don't use it for yourself. If you think that American citizens should have medical health freedom, then you think that people should be able to know their immunity status against any pathogen without involving the FDA, without involving the CDC, without involving your medical doctor. And by the way, Patty, on your case, I want to bring it back to Patty's situation. If there is a case to be made that people should be allowed to go in the park, every doctor that I've spoken to said if you get coronavirus, get outside for at least half an hour a day for sunshine.
right, right. Yeah, yeah. That's why I mean, I think closing the parks is as stupid as closing, preventing young children from going into public
What is it
places.
with
I
this
think
guy? He feels like he has to do something. Do you ever meet somebody
is
that feels like they have to do something? They can never just go and, you know what? I'm irrelevant today. I'm going to let, I don't have to weigh in on something today. I've got people that always push themselves into everything. Do you ever meet somebody like that?
I don't know. I really was so disappointed in how narrow-minded he was with the measles. And the twitters were kind of childish, I thought, similar to the president. I'm not sure detailing public policy in a tweet is the way to go, and Ed Day has a tendency to do that. He made fun of me in the newspaper. I said I wouldn't doubt that these measles cases were targeted. The pharmaceutical companies can absolutely control distribution of vaccines to achieve certain effects. We saw that in California in the 80s, where they were distributing hypervirulent MMR vaccines. They were experimental vaccines, they were unlicensed, and they were distributed in California, in Los Angeles, and in Haiti and the Dominican Republic, I think. And there was many, many deaths. And the CDC conceded it. I'm not making it up. They really did. And then, CDC said it was wrong, and they were sorry, which is remarkable. And that was in the 1990s. There was they were withdrew vaccines from the Ukraine and then reintroduced them and had an extraordinary explosion of measles. And they talk a lot about vaccine shortages, and that's why you need all this no fault liability. And it's an absolute joke. It costs nothing to make a vaccine. You're Once your R&D invest, I could make them here at home. All I need is a blender, a couple of eggs, some
Sure.
ether, detergent, a little mercury from the thermometer. Your mother'd freak out if you broke it, and just right in the blender. There you go. You got a homemade vaccine. So, and you probably didn't know that Merck owns more chickens than any other chicken owner in the world, and that's because they're germinating all these disgusting vaccines and making them, manipulating them, and so on and so forth.
I'll never look at a chicken
So,
again. I'll never look at a chicken the same way again. But yeah, I
yeah,
knew, but I knew
so
that. But I knew that. So
I,
go ahead, make your
I
point.
think though that, there are ways to skin this cat, and I'm ready to do it. And
Okay, so one of the ways I think we
no,
can do it is this International Statistical Classification of Diseases and Related Health Problems, or ICD. The way that they're counting coronavirus, I have a fantastic article. Thank you. I'm patting myself on the back where I bust the CDC out completely, and I had some help from Ali Fujito on this, with in terms of how they counted, uh, you know, flu that in the United States, how many flu deaths are in the United States, and if you're trying to get a grip on what's happening with coronavirus, you might want to make a comparison to flu. If you go to make a comparison to flu, you say there's 55,000 deaths from flu disease. You look at what they're doing in 2014. There were 4,500 cases of deaths of deaths from flu. The rest were due to pneumonia. Those were non-verified. Yeah, that didn't involve flu at all, so far as we know. Well, now, as we see the total number of flu cases nosediving, the title of my article is "Are we borrowing deaths from flu to count as coronavirus because it's a different form of
right,
pneumonia? And if so, then why the hell are we counting anything that is a respiratory virus that's not flu as coronavirus? If it tests negative for influenza, it's got to be COVID-19. That is going to inflate our
right,
numbers. And that is not, again, Patty, and everybody say it slow, not a rational basis for public health policy. That is an irrational basis. And so that's the kind of thing I'm talking about. It's so timely to bring you on today. We were going to talk about something else, but that didn't pan out. I'm so glad that you came on today. I'm going to give you the closing shot. Keep up the good work. You're a fighter. You've been a fighter since you were a little girl. I've been waiting to tell people this. I know something about Patty Finn. Well, when Patty Finn was, I think, about 11 years old, she was told that she had to go get her vaccine. and she got on her bicycle and she went for a bike ride and told her mom she was going to go get her vaccine. And she rode her bicycle around and around and around and finally came home and never got that vaccine. So at a very young age, Patty Finn was vaccine risk aware. So join me in thanking Patty by visiting the Good Health Lawyer on Facebook and follow the Good Health Lawyer on Facebook and go to patriciafinnattorney.com, make a referral, try to get her some business, especially if you're in the Rockland County area and you'd like to go out to the public. Please share this video and tag a person that you think would like to know about a rational basis for public health policy and law. Patty, I'll give you the closeout. Go for it.
Thanks. Jack, thank you very much. Over the last 2 years, I guess, since we've been working very closely, I have to thank you. Like I was joking about the science, but the truth is, you really do need science, because it is the science and the law. And I, as an attorney, wasn't really complete there until I met you. You went out of your way to make the science easy for me so I could explain it easily to the court. And, for that, I'm very grateful. And I think the reason that I won these cases is because I was pretty clear about things that maybe before were not so clear. And there's not a lot of scientists like you out there. Everybody, even look at Dr. Fauci, the way he's, there's evidence that he's lied in the past and he's done, not such nice things. So
Yeah,
we'll leave it at
absolutely.
that.
So, well, Patty, you know what
And
is
then,
it? Go ahead. Go ahead. Sorry.
someone like Bill Gates. I don't particularly like Bill Gates. I think he's a dangerous person, and I'm not going to listen. Why should I listen to him? He dropped out of college. He's not a doctor. I don't like Microsoft,
Hmm.
and yet now he's dictating policy to me and my family. I don't think so. He's someone I'm deeply worried about. So here's my prediction. Because Trump, we need, right? This is Trump's thing. We need a fake cure for a fake pandemic for the fake media. And I think that this week he's going to come out on Good Friday, like our Lord, and he's going to say it's all better, and we need to use the hydrochloroquine. I can't even say it.
Hydroxychloroquine. Yep.
Hydroxychloroquine. I don't know why I can't say that one. So, I do think it's going to end sooner than many people think.
Thank you.
And I believe that to be true. And I do work in many states. I'm a vaccine injury attorney. I take cases from all over the United States. I am exploring international causes of action or complaints that we could perhaps bring get us outside of U.S. jurisdiction and the Vaccine Act, which has been somewhat problematic to sue pharmaceutical companies. And, I can prevail on the civil rights aspect. I'm on a hot streak. I've won a couple of big things this last 12 months. And I even won in front of a judge that had turned down other vaccine cases. So when I was assigned to Judge Doyle in the Schwartz case, I thought, well, this can't be good. And yet it was. So I think it's changing, and I think I have a good strategy. I certainly have the science behind me, and there's many, many people that work for me and with me that are there to help. So I do need help in the community. I'm totally censored on social media. I can't get a post out for my life. So the only way to distribute that is for others to go to my page and share it. And I really, really hope you do. And finally, I do a radio show on Monday nights here in New York. WRCR Radio, 1700 AM. It is the Good Health Lawyer Radio Hour, and Jack's been on the show many times. And it's really a wonderful show. We talk about a lot of important subjects when it comes to public health and your rights. So check that out, WRCR.com or WRCR 1700 AM New York Talk Radio. So that's it. And thanks, Jack. I appreciate it. I always do. You're very kind.
Right on, Patty. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure having you on Unbreaking Science. Well, pretty soon we're going to have to go over that publication that was accepted. When I get the galley proofs, I'll go over in nitty-gritty detail the science that I did, and we'll go over the basis of why pathogenic priming is a very, very important place for us to begin to understand how we're going to approach enforcing translational research. The tenets, the basic tenets, Anthony Fauci basically said, hey, it's my vaccine. I'm Anthony Fauci. I want Moderna not to have to do these animal studies because guess what? We might find that there's a problem with them. So we're going to skip that. And we're going to go right to human trials. Well, that set the stage for all the vaccines to be able to skip that because they can just say, well, if they're skipping it, we're going to skip it too. And so this pathogenic priming, disease enhancement is a very, very important position for us to be in. And I'm going to take an hour or two and I'm going to explain in great detail down to the nitty gritty about why we think that these animal studies are so important. I've argued in Patty's cases and put the science into Patty's cases for vaccine court. And there's a few cases that we're going to close out on, and I'm going to still be working with Patty to help her out, but I'm no longer going to be an expert in vaccine court. I can't do it. Because the ludicrousness, the irrational, the twists of logic, the lies that the medical doctors that work for HHS, the defendant who is running the show, the defendant administers NVICP. So I'm stepped out of the program officially. And we'll be seeking, other ways to help Patty. But you can help Patty by finding her website, patriciafinnattorney.com, and following her on Facebook. You can help her by going to her Go Get Funding page. We'll put the link in the video. And also, I'm going to make a special request. Please go to the YouTube channel for WWDNYK Studios and follow us on WWDNYK Studios and start a discussion on this about the rational basis for all of your concerns, the rational basis for public health policy. That's the fight that we're in for. We didn't expect this. We didn't want this fight. We wanted to fight for the right to say no to things being injected in our body. Now we've got the fight for our ability to just leave our house and to visit with other people if we may already be immune. This is a bigger fight, and I want to thank everybody who's a part of it. I know so many people are doing their part. So go to WWDNYK Studios at YouTube.com. I'll meet you there, and we'll have a discussion, and I'll put Patty Finn's fundraiser there. Dr. James Lyons-Weiler coming to you from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and we are out.